This abandoned Turkish town is home to hundreds of eerie castles that resemble Disney properties. Burj Al Baba was originally intended to be a resort for Persian Gulf investors, complete with a Disney-esque hamlet of castle-style villas. However, that never happened. Rather, all of the destination chateaux are abandoned, creating a spooky ghost town in the Turkish highlands. A ghost town is typically associated with a history, often with a once thriving populace that is now extinct. It is quite probable that individuals in these settlements departed when the industry providing them with support vanished. For example, laborers may have previously been attracted to the area by mills or mines, but their economies may have collapsed when the resources were exhausted. In other instances, individuals may have been forced from their homes by natural catastrophes like floods or droughts. Something as hazardous as nuclear disaster, war, crime, or major pollution may have happened and driven out every resident of the town, never to return. Even yet, the tale of a ghost town might be unsettling, but the abandoned buildings that remain can be fascinating. They may attract visitors as well. Employees of the state park in Bannock, Montana, for instance, revive the town's ghost town once a year. In what way? By portraying the way of life that prevailed during the mid-1800s, when Bannock was a thriving mining community. Abandoned towns are similar in many ways. Even once thriving businesses might experience eerie emptiness. Just ask photographer Seth Lawless, who has built a reputation for himself taking pictures of America's abandoned amusement parks, shopping centers, and other buildings, places that were probably once cherished by the communities where they are still located. I've been documenting the most forgotten places throughout America and listening to the compelling personal stories of people who still live in these places, Lawless stated on his website. Their stories and experiences are part of an untold chapter of American history that needs to be heard. But one of the abandoned commercial complexes in Ohio that Lawless captured on camera holds particular significance for him. One of the biggest malls in the country at one point, Randall Park Mall, was eventually abandoned. Nevertheless, the photographer has many fond memories of the busy mall, including his first work at a retail establishment and his first encounter with Santa Claus. We all remember spending time there, and for the most part it was in happier times, Lawless stated to Gizmodo. However, the photographer's intention was furthered by the ghost town mall and the eerie photos taken there. Sometimes words just aren't enough, so I started taking pictures, he said on the Today Show. The majority of these retail complexes that have become abandoned towns are the result of inadequate cash flow. Maybe a well-known department store or other anchor establishment closes, reducing foot traffic. Other businesses suffer and eventually collapse until the mall is left empty. Newer residential complexes have met a similar end all across the world. That is, economic downturns or a lack of interest from purchasers have also caused businesses to close. There are a number of hypotheses explaining why contemporary towns in China are so frequently built but never inhabited. One reason why China's new developments may go unsold is the high cost of real estate in the nation. Furthermore, some people think that developers don't plan to fill their properties, at least not immediately. In the event of a battle, they seem to instead construct new cities outside of populated regions. In this manner, those who are compelled to leave their homes due to conflict would have new locations to go. It's important to keep in mind that there are now about 1.4 billion people residing in China. Thus, China's deserted cities may be empty too, waiting for a population explosion. Photographer Kai Kamara visited the nation after learning about its numerous ghost cities, which is how he explained the innumerable deserted structures. Nevertheless, Kamara told Business Insider that many of these new communities won't be finished or thriving for another 15 to 25 years after the developers start work on them. They are constructed for a far-off future. We are now limited to speculating on the shape they will have taken when we get to this point in time. However, one such ghost town in China isn't actually a town at all. It is a bustling city. The area known as Kangbashi was intended to accommodate 1 million people. The conurbation has theaters, parks, monuments, an airport, and museums in addition to residential structures. The only thing lacking are the potential residents who might or might not turn up. Cheng, a ghost town in eastern China, is another fascinating place to visit. The massive deserted housing construction was inspired by Paris, as is well known. Nor did builders treat their vision boards lightly. They constructed an Eiffel Tower, Champs-Élysées, and Notre Dame in their town. The people who created the French-inspired environment of Tianducheng in 2007 thought it would attract city people who desired to leave their hectic lives behind in favor of a more tranquil way of life. The expansive estate is still unoccupied today, however couples use it as a background for their wedding pictures. The cost of purchasing a home in the Parisian style proved to be too exorbitant. Similar to Tianducheng, Thames Town in China also takes its cues from a well-known European source. But this time, London is the city being imitated. Like the English capital, the Chinese equivalent features its own meandering river and plenty of the city's famous red phone booths. Even statues of Harry Potter and James Bond are present. However, the 10,000 people for whom the $800 million Shanghai building project was intended to serve did not show interest in the project, which covers just 1 square kilometer. Rather, Thames Town appears hauntingly deserted, save for the few inhabitants and tourists who stop by for pictures. Meanwhile, a ghost town fulfilled a political function in neighboring North Korea. Kijongdong is a northern town designed to lure South Koreans into defecting, and it is located next to a military-free zone. Built in the 1950s, the community presents the idyllic lifestyle that appears to be waiting for one on the other side of the border. Kijongdong is home to 200 households, according to official reports. But as time has passed, many who have watched the town have come to understand that this isn't the reality. Rather, the building's lights turn on and off at the same time every day, and the only people visible on the grounds are troops and housekeepers, not parents and their children. Regardless, the images were insufficient for the authorities of North Korea. To deliver a message to South Koreans that could be heard, they installed loudspeakers in Kijongdong. In addition, the sounds of military marches would be played non-stop by the government for 20 hours each day. However, their neighbors eventually retaliated. Rock music was blaring toward the north, and finally both sides decided to permanently turn it off. But in the instance of Burj Al Baba, political unrest did not prove to be the demise of the location. Instead, the developer encountered financial difficulties more than halfway through the project. Initially, however, the developers had visions of hundreds of exquisite chateaux in the French style, nestled amid Turkey's Bolu Mountains. As previously mentioned, the Sarat Group began construction on Burj Al Babas in 2014, with the expectation that rich investors from the Persian Gulf would be drawn to its chateau-style mansions. Every residence was to have the same style. On the outer facade of the buildings, no modifications shall be allowed, the destination's website stated. As a result, every house would have the same characteristics. These distinctive elements, which were meant to resemble a castle from a fairy tale, featured Juliet balconies, curving turrets, and elaborate decorations. Buyers would be allowed to customize the interior design of the residences to suit their preferences, even if it deviated from the romantic, Disney-esque outside of the given property. There would be much for inhabitants to do within Burj Al Babas. In addition to containing, the developers of the aforementioned shopping mall pledged to construct eateries, meeting spaces, and a fitness facility. Not only that, but the complex was also supposed to have Turkish baths, steam rooms, basketball courts, tennis courts, walking paths, and movie theaters. Buyers would pay $370,000 to $530,000 per buyer for the chateau, depending on the location of the property. For example, the most costly choice was a lakefront home, while a corner lot came with a price tag of $440,000. But in order to guarantee their place, prospective residents had to individually pay a $50,000 deposit. And customers from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait did express interest in and curiosity about the project. The developers had intended to build over 730 of these royal-inspired residences in all, but they were only able to sell 350 of them, or over half of the available land. Construction workers, meanwhile, plowed ahead. The developers had built 587 properties, 237 more than had previously been purchased, before they encountered a significant issue: despite the fact that they had only sold 50% of Burj Al Baba's residences. They could no longer proceed with the project since they ran out of money. The developer of the Burj Al Baba, the Sarat Group, accumulated a $27 million debt during the construction of the project, as reported by Bloomberg. Furthermore, Turkish courts declared that the Sarat Group had declared bankruptcy when the firm filed for bankruptcy protection. If a person or business owes too much money to be able to pay off their debt, they may file for bankruptcy. Then the courts choose a trustee, who then computes the monetary assets and sells any tangible ones. The insolvent entity uses the money it later gets to pay off as much of the debt as it can. To continue working on the initiative, however, the Sarat Group wanted to seek for bankruptcy protection. In the event that a person or organization demonstrates the possibility of recovering losses, they may choose to pursue this course of action in lieu of restructuring given enough time. The head of the Sarat Group, Mehmet Emin Yerdalen, said Burj Al Babas should be protected from bankruptcy. The project has a $200 million estimated value. To pay down our debt, we will just need to sell 100 villas. He told Bloomberg, "I think we can get through this crisis in 4 to 5 months and partially launch the project in 2019. He also provided an explanation for the Sarat Group's extreme debt. Purchasers had neglected to make payments. We couldn't get around $7.5 million in receivables for the villas that we sold to Gulf countries," he stated. However, he did state that the business will challenge the decision, which was made at the close of 2018. However, the failure of the goal was a relief to some. A lot of the locals that reside close to Burj Al Babas dislike the building's fantasy architecture. They believe it stands in sharp contrast to the other buildings in the region, which include timber houses from the Byzantine era, a mosque that dates back centuries, and other structures. Actually, since Burj Al Baba's construction started, the Turkish government has implemented laws that would forbid such a project from moving further in the future. As a result, new development must often blend in with the nearby villages, and housing complexes must only include low-rise structures. However, other experts think it was too little, too late. Yasar Adnan Adanali, a specialist in urban planning, told The Guardian, "I worry that projects like Burj Al Baba's open Pandora's box in some respects. In Turkey, unplanned developments that do not take into account the history and geography of their surrounds have proliferated." Erdogan, the president of Turkey, has also advocated for building initiatives inside his nation's boundaries. It appears that more infrastructure transformation creates more jobs. However, the construction bubble has burst. Burj Al Babas was only one of several abandoned building sites by heavily indebted construction companies at the end of January 2019. As far as Burj Al Babas is concerned, the Sarat Group filed for bankruptcy. However, Attila Yesilada, an analyst at Global Source Partners in Turkey, stated that the shortage of funding was affecting the overall business. Not all house builders file for bankruptcy. Such who provide items to such industries also bear the consequences, he claimed. Turkey has thus taken action to increase revenue, much like the Sarat Group did by luring outside investors to buy real estate. To start with, the nation has facilitated the naturalization process for non-Turkish nationals. How? By lowering the financial requirements that residents seeking to settle there must fulfill. And all of this gave the Sarat Group optimism that their Disney-style complex, which is presently vacant, would soon reopen. It is an incomplete and deserted ghost town of cookie-cutter dwellings nestled within the tree-covered highlands of northern Turkey till that time.